Welcome to Debt Matters. Imagine for a second that you owe a massive sum of money
Right.
and you are diligently making these hefty interest payments, year after year, just watching the cash leave your bank account.
Yeah, an awful feeling.
Truly. But then you look at your statement and you realize your actual loan balance hasn't gone down at all.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the principal is identical to the very day you borrowed it. So now take that incredibly stressful personal scenario, scale it up to the hundreds of millions, and imagine you are a major, highly visible public cultural organization.
Well, it's a precarious position,
Hmm.
and it really forces a complete reevaluation of how we measure institutional financial health.
Absolutely.
Because we are looking at a scenario where the cost of capital actively cannibalizes the core purpose of the institution itself.
Exactly. So today we are examining the financial reality of the British Council. We have a stack of material on the desk today. If we connect the dots between the latest National Audit Office report, the financial disclosures from the Foreign, Commonwealth, and Development Office, and the organization's own internal turnaround plans, the picture is pretty stark.
It really is.
We are talking about an organization facing a £197 million government loan, and they have made absolutely zero capital repayments since April 2024.
Zero. Yeah, let that sink in.
And furthermore, the National Audit Office reports they aren't even expected to return to profit until the 2029-2030 financial year.
Right. So the documents outline this really complex dynamic. I mean, we are not looking at a standard commercial collection case here.
Right, it's not a bank foreclosing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not a bank simply seizing a warehouse from a private business and liquidating it. This is about the very delicate balance of public money.
Right.
By analyzing this specific case, we will examine what happens when an organization owes a substantial sum, but fundamentally lacks the cash flow to repay it.
The actual money in the bank.
Right. The objective here is to explore that tension between a creditor's mandate to recover taxpayer funds and the absolute necessity of preserving a viable, functioning entity.
So we need to trace the timeline backward to
Right.
understand how the math escalated to this level.
Yeah, let's do that.
Because a £197 million balance doesn't just appear out of thin air, especially for an organization whose primary function is cultural exchange and language education.
No, it certainly doesn't. The reports show a compounding crisis that basically began with a sudden, catastrophic shock to their entire operating model.
Right, the timeline traces directly back to the pandemic.
Exactly.
The global lockdowns just completely disrupted the British Council's core income streams.
Overnight.
Yeah, overnight. Their primary revenue drivers, so English language teaching, their international examinations, and their broader overseas operations, all of it just ground to a sudden halt.
Yeah.
The data shows a 28% drop in their total income during the 2020-2021 period alone.
Which is massive.
Massive. And that sudden revenue collapse led to an initial £60 million loan from the Foreign, Commonwealth, and Development Office, often called the FCDO and HM Treasury, back in July 2020.
Right. And the intention behind that initial facility was purely emergency support.
Just a lifeline.
Right, a lifeline. The government provided a temporary bridge to get them through an unprecedented global shutdown. I mean, they were assuming that operations would snap back to normal once the lockdowns lifted.
But that assumption proved overly optimistic.
Very.
And the math quickly became this massive burden. That initial £60 million facility was amended and extended repeatedly.
Yeah, time and time again.
So that original $60 million has ballooned into the £197 million figure we see today.
That's wild.
And get this, the organization paid £42 million purely in interest between 2020, 2021, and 2025, 2026.
Just staggering.
And the projections show they expect to pay another £53 million in interest by 2029, 2030, all while their net losses since the pandemic have reached £184 million.
Right. So the cost of servicing the debt is actively draining the exact resources they need to stabilize their operations.
It's a trap.
It is. It creates this vicious feedback loop where paying for past survival makes future survival less likely.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Sure.
Because it feels totally akin to paying the minimum balance on a credit card after losing your job. You are dutifully sending in that payment every single month, and the interest is draining whatever remaining cash you have, but the principal, that actual mountain of debt, never shrinks.
Yeah, I totally understand why that analogy jumps to mind, but it actually falls apart when we look at the mechanics of public sector finance.
How so?
Well, a household can eventually declare bankruptcy, right? They wipe the slate clean, take a credit score hit, and start over.
True.
But the British Council is an arm's-length public body. They literally cannot file for bankruptcy in a conventional sense.
Oh, right.
Furthermore, the UK's cultural soft power is completely tied up in this quote-unquote credit card. If Treasury just forgives the debt, they set a really dangerous precedent for every other government-funded body that runs into trouble.
Yeah, but if they have already paid £42 million in interest and are still losing money hand over fist, extending the loan multiple times seems counterproductive.
It does look that way from the outside.
Right. I mean, why keep hitting the snooze button on the debt if the debtor clearly lacks the capacity to pay it off?
So debt professionals separate this into two categories. They ask, is the debtor temporarily short of cash due to an external shock, or is the underlying business model no longer sustainable in the current market?
Meaning, is the engine flooded, or has the engine fallen out of the car entirely?
Exactly. Great way to put it. An extension is a tool to manage a flooded engine.
Yeah.
If an organization just needs a little breathing room until normal operations resume, giving them time makes total financial sense.
Right. Just let it dry out.
But the international education market permanently changed post-pandemic. Competitors moved online and travel patterns shifted. The model itself required structural adjustment. The initial extensions were granted without requiring immediate, harsh structural changes. So the breathing space became a trap because the underlying capacity to generate reliable revenue hadn't been fixed to match the new market reality.
Which moves us from the abstract financial mathematics to the actual physical toll of trying to escape this debt trap.
Yeah, the real-world impact.
Because the numbers on the balance sheet dictate severe operational realities.
You do. And the turnaround plan outlined in the documentation is severe by literally any corporate standard.
The mandate is to deliver £306 million in net benefits by 2029-2030.
Right.
And to achieve that, they are proposing cutting approximately 1,180 jobs from a global workforce of around 7,880.
Wow.
And this comes on top of 2,110 jobs that have already been eliminated since April 2021.
We are looking at a staggering reduction in human capital. And remember, this is for an organization whose primary product is human interaction and education.
It is a massive global retreat.
Yeah.
They are shutting down operations entirely in 11 countries and actively reducing their activity in another 15. Plus, they are selling off assets, actual buildings and properties, just to reduce their ongoing operating costs.
The harsh reality of structured settlements dictates these outcomes, unfortunately.
Does it have to be this brutal?
Well, when an organization is fundamentally unable to service its debt, a workable agreement requires measurable savings and highly realistic forecasts. Wishing for better revenue next year carries absolutely no weight with auditors.
They need guarantees.
You have to prove you can cut costs today, period.
I am really struggling to follow the strategic logic of that approach, though.
How do you mean?
Well, if you close your global operations and you lay off the exact staff who run your programs, the teachers, the exam administrators, aren't you fundamentally dismantling the machinery you need to generate income?
I see.
The whole point is to pay back the loan, but this feels like selling your car to pay for gas.
Right, but you are assuming all parts of that machinery are profitable. The restructuring documents show a completely different reality.
Really? Yeah.
Protecting the creditor often means accepting that the debtor must become a radically smaller organization. The calculation here is that the cost of running specific geographical nodes is currently higher than the revenue those nodes generate.
Oh, so they're losing money just keeping the doors open in certain places.
Exactly. They are stripping the organization down to its absolute most profitable core functions.
So they are basically trying to shrink their way to profitability by abandoning any region that doesn't immediately pay for itself.
The creditor needs a credible route for recovering the original loan. If the broad global operation is bleeding cash, the only mathematically sound route is a smaller footprint.
That makes sense.
From a strict debt recovery perspective, a smaller, sustainable entity is vastly preferable to a massive entity that requires constant cash injections just to meet payroll.
Okay, let's shift our perspective to the unique position of the creditor here. We are analyzing a government department, not a commercial bank going after a private tech company.
Right. The dynamics change completely when public funds and public organizations are involved.
Because if a private bank forecloses on a struggling business, the bank just takes the collateral, auctions it off, and moves on.
Pretty cut and dry.
But the creditor here is Treasury and the FCDO. Aggressive recovery action could actively damage the public interest by destroying a cultural institution.
Absolutely.
The loan is officially due in September 2027, but the documentation shows they are currently negotiating an arrangement that could spread the repayment over as many as 15 years.
And the National Audit Office raises crucial questions about this exact dynamic. They are tasked with evaluating value for money for the taxpayer, right?
Right.
So they ask, when is restructuring a debt over a decade and a half more realistic than demanding payment in full today?
Because demanding £197 million right now would undoubtedly bankrupt the organization.
Exactly. The NAO also questions whether physical assets should be accepted instead of cash. How can public money be protected without forcing the debtor into outright failure?
It's a delicate balance.
It is. The best outcome in debt recovery is rarely the fastest repayment. If the government forces the British Council into insolvency, the overall loss to the public in terms of international influence, diplomatic soft power, and the sudden unemployment of thousands of staff might far exceed the value of the actual loan.
So we have two different government priorities just totally colliding here.
Yeah, head on.
The Foreign Office wants the cultural footprint and the diplomatic influence, but the Treasury is mandated to ensure the math balances and loans are repaid.
That is the central dilemma. It is a friction point between geopolitical goals and strict fiscal mandates.
Right.
I mean, providing a 15-year repayment window means inflation will eat away at the real value of that £197 million. The Treasury is basically accepting a quiet loss in real terms to prevent a loud, chaotic collapse of the institution.
And while this is a massive public sector example, these principles apply to debt collection universally.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether you are a government department or just a small business trying to collect an unpaid invoice, forcing a debtor into failure often means the creditor gets absolutely nothing.
A bankrupt debtor pays no one. That's the golden rule.
Yeah.
Patient capital is a financial necessity, not a professional courtesy. The creditor has to give the debtor a realistic chance to restructure.
You provide the breathing room, but you verify the measurable savings. Both sides basically must agree on a sustainable plan.
Yeah, a workable agreement needs clear deadlines and strict accountability.
Right.
You cannot just grant a 15-year extension without requiring the severe operational cuts we discussed earlier.
Right. There has to be a trade-off.
The Treasury demands those job cuts and country closures as the steep price for their patience.
Well, we have unpacked a truly complex situation today. We have a £197 million loan that started as an emergency pandemic lifeline and mutated into this massive financial weight. We are looking at looming operational closures, severe job losses, and a fundamental shrinking of a major cultural organization, all driven by the mechanics of debt.
It really serves as a prime example of the careful tightrope walk between public accountability and sustainable institutional recovery.
It demonstrates how the abstract mechanics of interest rates and Treasury rules can reshape the physical reality and global footprint of an institution.
It really does.
Which leaves us with a compelling final thought to ponder. If a public organization is forced to sell off its physical cultural assets, lay off its dedicated staff, and permanently shrink its global footprint purely to service the interest on a government loan,
Right.
at what point does the cost of collecting the debt become greater than the value of the money itself?
That tension raises fundamental questions about the true purpose of public lending and really what we prioritize as a society.
Something to think about the next time you look at a balance sheet. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for listening.